You Krogans live for centuries. Don't tell me you haven't had a few interesting adventures.
Well, there was this one time the Turians almost wiped out our entire race. That was fun.
I heard about that. You know, they almost did the same to us.
It's not the same.
It seems pretty much the same to me.
So your people were infected with a genetic mutation? An infection that makes only a few in 1,000 children survive birth? And I suppose it's destroying your entire species?
Okay, second last page of the chapter. We're getting there. Kind of feel sad that it's coming to an end. Since we're on the topic of sad, we can discuss what is possibly the most contentious and controversial topic in the Mass Effect universe, the Genophage. Now, of all topics in the game, I don't think there is one that yields a greater moral ambiguity than the Genophage. It's BioWare's greatest. There is no right or wrong answer. You cannot have your cake and eat it. You have to make a choice. Seriously, throughout the trilogy, you get information on the Genophage and the history of it. It's almost like you're listening to a court case and you're the judge, and this all culminates in Mass Effect 3 when you have to make a verdict. Do you cure the Genophage or do you destroy it? So let's start. There are 4 major players we need to know in the Genophage saga: the Rachni, the Salarians, Krogans, Turian. Now, Rachni are like lobsters, sick of our shit of boiling them alive. Seriously, people, that's some fucked up shit. We need to stop doing that. Stop the madness. They're split between lobsters sick of our shit and cockroaches that spit acid. They're territorial f***ers and are really intelligent. The Salarians are an amphibious looking species who are very bent on science. They have a short lifespan, which probably explains why all Salarians you meet are complete and utter deluxe edition assholes. Except Morden. Morden's cool. The Krogan are what happens when you don't regulate steroids on a planet of reptiles. These fuckers are hard to kill, quick to breed, and they live for centuries. Luckily, they live on a planet called Tachanka, where there are even worse creatures than the Krogan. Those creatures are Krogan's natural predators and handle the whole population control aspect of governance. Then there are the Turians. The Turians are a highly militaristic species that's all about rank and file. Since the asshole role was already taken by the Salarians, the Turians took it upon themselves to be thoroughbred dicks when it comes to fitting in. It's quite fitting because between the two of them, you're either getting shit on or you're getting rounding off to the nearest shit. I'd say that the Turians are thoroughbred dicks. Except for Garrus. Garrus is cool. To understand why the Genophage was made in the first place, we need to discuss the instigating event that was the Rachni Wars. What you need to understand is there is no party that can be said to be responsible for the Rachni Wars. No party. There is no single race that we can look to and say the whole Rachni problem was their fault. No race. There isn't a race that we should look at in the same way that we look at the Quarians when it comes to the threat and the menace that is the Geth and say, you messed up and you need to atone. There isn't a single race that we should look at for that. Okay? Clear. So anyway, the Rachni Wars were a war that lasted well over 300 years. See, it started when a group of scientists, now remember, no party is responsible. This group of scientists, who just happened to be of a particular council race, they found an out-of-commission mass relay and thought it was a good idea to use it. When they came out on the other side, they landed in Rachni space. The Rachni didn't take too kindly to this, because of course they didn't. I imagine the conversation went like this. The Rachnis were like, Ita, and like, Uchulangi. And the Salarians were like, text, like, I'll travel keep busy for it. And then the fight started. This fight lasted over 300 years. It lasted in council space and the council were getting their asses handed to them. Main reason was because the Rachni bred fast, they bred in large numbers, and whenever the numbers were thinned down, they would go back into their toxic layers where they could shore up the numbers again. You know, then when things got a little bit too hot and spicy for the pepper, they'd kick in an orgy, get out some more babies, and then come out. None of the other races could go into these toxic places, and that is where the Salarians got a great idea.
People uplifted the Krogan. We know them best.
You mean you used us to fight a war you couldn't win? It wasn't the Salarians, or the Asari, or even the Turians that stopped the Rachni. It was Krogan blood that turned the tide.
And after that, you ceased to be useful.
Now remember, there was no one race we can point to for the problem. But The Solarians, they just so happened to be them, so the Solarians went ahead and decided to rope the Krogans in. At this time, the Krogans were way behind on technological development. Tachanka was decimated by a civil war, and it all went tits up when they used nuclear weapons. They literally blew themselves back to the Stone Age, literally. So the Solarians figured it would be a good idea to get these Krogans, uplift them with science and stuff, give them weapons, and sick them on the Rachni, because that was a good idea, which the Krogan did, and won. The Rachni were completely exterminated. That whole strategy of the Rachni going back into their toxic layers didn't work, because the Krogans just, had a picnic and walked right in behind them. So the Rachni were eliminated to the point where they thought all Rachni were dead. Obviously, Mass Effect 1 we find out was not the case, but as far as the galaxy was concerned, Rachni are gone, and all was happy, and there was much rejoicing happening. So the Krogans started thinking,
we want more money. Yeah, more money.
And by money, of course, they meant land. They started taking over planets that were previously occupied by Rachni. Made the council a little bit nervous, but they humored the Krogan. Actually, oddly enough, it was very much like Germany pre-World War II. They were just expanding and expanding, and the official government was a little, but it's cool. Let them have it, let them have it. The problem was the Krogan population was growing out of control. As I said, in Tachanka, they had natural predators that were hunting them down. But on these Rachni planets, previously Rachni planets, they didn't have these natural predators to thin out the numbers. As their numbers grew, they decided they wanted more planets. The planets that they went to didn't have natural predators, so they grew some more, and then they needed more planets. And do you see where I'm going with this? It kind of just spells itself out. So eventually the council decided, genoeg is genoeg, and I think the Krogan got a little bit too aggressively close to an Asari colony, and that's when the Asari were like, whoa, hang on, now you're playing games. Eventually, the council decided enough is enough. Genoeg is genoeg. A grap's a grap, maar je maakt nie 'n sambreel en 'n man se hol with me, to quote Leon Schuster. I can't believe I'm actually quoting Leon Schuster. Shut up, who asked you? I think at that point, the Krogan got a little bit too aggressively close to an Asari colony. Now, the Asari were the oldest of the races in council space, and at that point, I think they were the only race on the council. So, when it came through, they were like the maternal mother figures of the civilization. When the Krogans approached and everybody was like, stop doing it, the Krogans approached with so what are you going to do about it? Just try and stop us. And that's when the fight broke out. Council space went to war with the Krogans. This lasted an additional set of centuries. I think it was like over 300 years again. And in those centuries, the Krogan were kicking the shit out of them. Remember again, the Krogan lived for centuries. At this point, along came the Turians. And the Turians, being more militaristic based, were actually a lot more effective. The Solarians were about science. The Asari were all about this mysticism and diplomacy, and they were actually really great at diplomacy. Both of them didn't really have a culture of war, and that's where the Turians came through. See, the Turians stepped up into council space and suddenly were like, listen, we can fight, we can do this, let's play. Turians got involved in the fight, and when they do, the Krogan finally decided, you know what, I'm done playing this little game of fisticuffs. I have this slightly unethical idea of choosing to crash a moon into one of your planets. So naturally the council got a little bit nervous, didn't respond quite too well. We don't take kindly to that kind of behavior. And that's when the Solarians conveniently, completely unrelated to the whole situation, designed the
Genophage was the only way to keep your urges in check.
After creating it, the Solarians sat at a table with the Turians. The Asari in the corner pretended like they weren't listening, and they were like, totally by accident, completely unrelated to the current conflict we're having, created this substance that will kind of thin out the Krogan numbers, and only the Krogan numbers. You see, it will then affect the birth rate so that only 1 in few Krogans are born, so it kind of plugs the hole. Now, I'm not saying you should use it, I'm just saying it's sitting on the table. I'm looking away for an extended period of time, completely trusting that you will not. At this point, they realized the Turians had left at the Genophage when they said thin down the Krogans, because, they're Turians. The Turians come through, deployed the Genophage, and this devastated the Krogan. The Krogan were demolished and driven from the territories that they held. This left them with thin numbers, disorganized, and without friends. The birth rates were altered, and the Genophage has been in play ever since.
You understand nothing! You have not seen the piles of children that never lived. The Krogan were wrong. We will make it right. and then we will have our revenge. We have the Blood Pack, and we have the Solarian. When our clan numbers in the millions, we will not need support. When we cure the Genophage, Warlock Gold will rule all Krogan.
Naturally, they're still a little bit bitter about it. That's where we find ourselves when the trilogy starts. Pissed off Krogans, unapologetic Turians and Solarians, and naive human who comes in and has to make the final decision. See, the game then leaves it up to you to take your position on the matter. Was this action justified? Was it within the rules of engagement? Or was it a war crime? The Geneva Convention today holds that chemical warfare is a no-no and is a war crime. That's our ethics standards in the 21st century. And a chromosome aside, as you play the game in the 21st century with our 21st century moral compass, is it acceptable? Throughout the trilogy, the people you meet keep stating their case on the position of the Genophage. Rex gives you that monologue, Morden gives you his position, Garrus gives you his permission. All this is built up to the point where you ultimately have to decide. Do you cure the Genophage or do you let it persist? And in Mass Effect 3, you have to take that choice. There is no other way to wiggle out of it. You have to choose, cure it, or destroy it. The Genophage is the most contentious topic in the Mass Effect universe, and even today you can hear people going back and forth about whether it was the right thing to do and if it was acceptable. I love hearing people debate over this one. Both sides have very valid cases, and the topic is one of the greatest moral ambiguities I've ever come across in my life. And with that, I leave you to marinate on it. I breezed over it, but there is so much more into it, and I wish you could come to appreciate just how fantastic a case study it is in terms of what we deem to be acceptable as a civilization. I thank you all again for watching me, and as usual, may all your dreams come true, provided you work for them. Khotso.
Passion for